I loved about this conversation was just how many creative practices Jim has tried or does, from trying different musical instruments to painting, whittling, building a house, his podcast, to teaching the Enneagram and hosting jam sessions for Beatles fans. I loved the breadth of activities. Jim Gum is a self-preservation 3 and an Enneagram trainer, teacher, and coach based in Kansas City. Since discovering the Enneagram in 1991, he's been committed to teaching and sharing the system with others. And given he's so passionate about the Enneagram, he can speak really clearly to his lived experience as a self-preservation 3. If you're new here, I'm Samantha Mackay, host of the Creativity and Enneagram series, and I'm passionate about how we heal our creative spirit so we can express our true selves in our relationships, our work, and with our bodies, and just in our everyday lives. Check out the links below to learn more about Jim and to take my free experimenting with paint class. Enjoy. What does creativity mean to you?
Yeah, so I think as a 3, I don't think of myself as a very creative person. And I think my son is a 4. He's a social 4.
Right.
He's a singer-songwriter.
Mm.
And I'm a 3. And so here's how I differ. I am so happy to play cover songs. I want to execute the cover song as perfectly as possible. I have written a few songs, but oh my gosh, few and far between, kind of shy to share them, self-preservation, super sensitive to that. So I think I have artistic sentiment. I loved art in school. I love music. I'm a musician. I paint. I woodwork. And I have a friend who's a self-pres 3 who's just like me. And what he said is what I agree with. I want to try everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it this one way. He goes, I kind of have this belief that I can do anything and everybody else should be able to do anything too. Like you could learn how to do that. And I think that part is what the creativity looks like for the 3 is just, I want to learn that song. I want to learn that guitar solo. I want to learn how to play harmonica. I want to, all that energy. And then you take that work tenacity piece, it's relentless. I
Mm.
think that's what's true. So I think in terms of creativity, like novel ideas, that's harder for me. That's much
Mm.
harder.
But it
But
sounds like there's like a wealth of creative expression.
there is. And what it
Mm.
is I think like watercolor, I have a friend who became a watercolor artist about the same time I was picking it up. And I go, oh, I love his paintings. I want to learn how to paint like he paints. And I want to learn his techniques, or my my musical inspiration, my muses were Elton John and the Beatles. The Beatles got me to play guitar, and Elton John got me to play the piano. And I wanted to play their stuff and, imitate it. So it's this weird blend of creativity and tenacity that I find that I really have, where people give up often in the creative process or they get frustrated. Um, I just will keep trying.
Mm.
Till I get something.
Mm. I love it's I can try anything. I can do anything. Like nothing is out of my reach. Nothing's impossible. If I want it, I'll just do it until I've cracked it.
Right.
But the other thing I find fascinating is the copying, being
Yes.
completely satisfied and fulfilled by playing a cover song perfectly or painting exactly like someone else. And I've seen people do this and I've wondered, how do you get joy from that? And yet it's there. Joy is there. And
Yeah.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Well, and it's like I had a really good Beatles band for about 10 years, and we got really good and bringing joy to other people. That, that's
Mm,
that mirroring the 3 the response you get. The pitfall, I'll just talk about the dark side of the three here a little bit.
Please.
Um, threes, they just work so hard to learn all the things they want to learn. And then they want to pretend that it was just natural giftedness.
There was no work here. I just started this yesterday.
Yeah, but they didn't see me working for 2 hours on three measures to get it right. And that's the vanity, that's the deceit, um,
And it's interesting
and
how
deceiving
that,
myself, deceiving myself.
yeah, I can see that perfection in the I've copied it perfectly.
Mhm.
Like it that, and I think I just want to add here that, you mentioned before that creativity can equal novelty, but I think that's one of the misnomers about creativity that we live in this particular cultural, society, is that creative has to be out of the box or different in the way
Yeah.
it is for fours and sevens. But
Yes.
that's not true at all. That's just
Well,
one slice.
yeah, and even I've seen a TED Talk on Bob Dylan. I've listened to Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney said, "Oh, we were knickers," and nicking being stealing things, and I can recognize a chord progression. It's like, okay, he stole that chord progression from that song. He made something new with it, but that chord progression was from that song, and I can see it. He said that's what it was from. But that idea of taking that and creating something new with it, I think
Mm.
that is that creative process that they were amazing at doing. That's why they're so good.
Mm. Well, there is that nothing is ever new. We just
Right,
recreate or reshape or express it through our own lens.
right, right.
Yeah, in the
And
world.
I think
Mm.
that's really true. And I think sometimes when people say something's derivative or, they're just copying something else, I feel like when I go to art fairs, you've probably been to an art fair outside the
Mm.
booths. Every booth, they have their thing that they're doing, and they just do a whole bunch of that thing. You know, they don't do a bunch of different things.
No.
They do photography or they do, collages or, and they're,
Unless there are
and
seven who can't decide and they do a bit of everything. Like they haven't got their focus yet. But other than that,
yeah,
completely.
yeah. But I do think, so I would get together with this friend who was a painter, and we would get together and we'd paint the same thing.
Hmm.
And watercolor is great because you end up with a painting, that night. And every time we did a painting, his painting looked like his painting, and my painting always looked like my painting. And I began to realize, oh, it's just like your handwriting. It's I
Mm.
can't. I can try to emulate some of the stuff, but like my hand will never create that, the way he does it. And then
Mm.
he emulated a couple people that he studied, let me know about, but then he was trying to find his own, voice too. And I think that's how they do it, is
Mm.
just you have to learn from somebody.
Yeah, like I remember when I was painting, I had my Jackson Pollock moment. And yes, there was paint all over the house. This rented apartment. Now I was cleaning that off for years. But it was such an interesting experience to just have that visceral sense of dropping and throwing the paint and going, wow, this is really an embodied experience. I think
Yeah,
I'd need a studio to continue this as an art practice, but I'm glad that I've done it, you know?
yeah, yeah. Well, and so if I go to the podcast that I was
Mm.
doing, I thought about podcasts for a very long time. I knew that it was something I loved to listen to. And I was afraid of two things. I was afraid of starting a podcast and stopping it after a few sessions.
Right.
And I realized, oh, I'm not interviewing anybody famous. So I've got to be really interesting. I've got to make it interesting. And
Hmm.
my friend gave me this podcast. He sent me a podcast on how to do podcasts. And it
Hmm.
was editing and And that creative process was really, I was given a form. And then I could, when I had that structure and I knew, okay, I'm going to do a season, it's going to be 9 episodes. I'm going to start and stop it. It's going to be 15 minutes long. I'm going to edit it and I'm going to use my son's music. And I kind of had the whole thing. And then the implementation of that was very satisfying. It felt creative, but I was stealing the length from this podcast. I was stealing the editing from this podcast. I was stealing the music. I was stealing little bits from every podcast that I liked,
Mm.
and that was my podcast. But I didn't
Yeah.
start from scratch
Mm. The blank page is a remarkably hard place to start.
for everyone.
Yeah, that's daunting.
Yeah.
But I'm curious because when I heard you speaking about I'd have to be more interesting and what if I stop, I heard that sense of what is failure behind that. Like that was very but then once you added in the structure, it seemed like those fears went away.
Yeah, they did. They did. And then good feedback, like, oh, this is a great podcast. This is amazing.
Mm,
Okay, I'm fine. You know,
right.
um, it's funny. I'll do a lot of um, workshops, seminars, and I never talk about what type I am initially, or they always go, so what type are you? What type are you? And it's like, well, if we get to the end of this and you tell me that I did a good job, I will be very happy because I know I'm really prepared when I come in. I'm not winging it. I keep tweaking it. So part of perfection for me is continual improvement.
Interesting. Okay.
That's a very three-ish thing. So I um started teaching the Enneagram in earnest when I started my training. And I've had large classes, which of course is just a blast.
Mm,
And but the energy I get from failing and then tweaking it and fail, like I don't want to throw away everything I've done. I want to just keep making it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And that's how I do it. And I think that's a very much a three, it gets into the efficiency, it gets
mm,
into what's successful, what works for the other people.
mm.
I think I do a pretty creative way on presenting the Enneagram. Uh, and I've borrowed from the narrative tradition. I've borrowed from this book. I've borrowed from that. But it's never set. It's like, okay, making this change.
I'm curious though. So is there a line between the level of failure that's manageable and creates continual improvement and the level at which things stall or become too much? Is there,
Absolutely.
there is, all right. Okay.
I've been having trouble painting. And partly it's just inertia and getting the paints out and wanting to finish things or not being at the level I'd like to be at. But the only way to get there is by doing it. And then since it's kind of like I'm not there. So I return to things that I do feel success in.
Mm,
Um, but I think I'm always pushing something. I do know too, uh, having failure experiences makes me kind of go, oh, I'm not touching that again. So
oh, I see. Okay.
I've played keyboards, I've played bass, I've played harmonica, I've played guitar, I've sung. I played drums once, trying to do and thought, oh man, I'm not a drummer. I'm never doing that again because the exposure, failure. The other one was I was really into classical guitar like 30 years ago and was trying to be good, but the level of practice to
Mm-hmm.
be a really great classical guitarist is so hard. And this friend said, "Hey, will you play this classical guitar for my wedding?" And I just I was so nervous. I couldn't play. I felt so exposed. And I was like, I'm never doing that. I've never done it again. So
Mm,
I love playing with a band. Uh, I love leading the band. I love organizing the band. I love efficient band practice. I hate having my time wasted, but that I'm really good at that. Uh,
mm,
so it allows me to perform or do that, but
mm.
it's almost like I'm an engineer and trying to get there.
Yeah, interesting. So, with the podcast, what I heard was that creating that sort of structure and then getting positive feedback helped you continue to be creative and make that podcast.
Yeah.
So, is that what you'd say in general helps you to continue being creative?
I think what I've learned over time is there's certain things I really enjoy and that kind of fit my type. And there's certain things that it's like, I don't enjoy this. So when that piece of art goes from a three-ish thing to a one-ish thing, like detail, precision, there, I'm not slow in doing stuff, so I'll make mistakes. This is a classic three thing,
Mhm.
we're gonna get to the goal. So like I've built a house. I'll try to do any project. I love rough-in framing. Oh, it's the best. It's you see so much progress, it's not exact, but like precision woodworking, I would never try to make a dovetail joint. I have a friend who is making guitars and you're coming down to millimeters and stuff, and he'll work on it a year, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna do that.
Mm.
And that's okay. So I know
There's such a
that about
big difference between the self-pres three sort of excellence and
yeah,
that precision you might see at the one.
yeah.
Yeah,
Even the painting I like to do is more impressionistic. It's not fine detail.
I hear you. That's just way too hard. Like you may not have the time. I definitely do not have the patience.
Well, I can't, I can't succeed at it. I can't
Mm,
succeed. So
mm. So I'm curious with this art project at the moment, like that sounds like it might be like a creative block.
yeah,
Like, is that true? And like, do you experience creative blocks, and what have you done about them in the past?
this is a really good question. I'll tell you a story about how I learned how to play harmonica. So there used to be this thing you'd get on vacation. There was these books by Klutz Press, like how to juggle, how to do this, how to do magic tricks. And there was how to play harmonica for the musically hopeless. And I bought it. It had a book and a tape and a harmonica. And I was diligent and did it. But one of the things that it said in that book, he said, most people, it's it's 3 days to forever. So what you learn in the first 3 days, you're going to play that forever. So you take your harmonica and you learn Old Susanna, which is basically breathing in and out to some
O-
rhythm. It's so
Okay.
easy that that's all you ever play is
All
you
right.
you plateau. And so I think for me, it the learning thing or pushing myself, like I think where I'm stuck on painting is every time I go down to paint, I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna paint. I don't just go in there and start throwing paints around. It's like I gotta have a scene and I gotta have
Mhm.
a picture, a reference, and it's just stopping me every day. And I got into it a little bit, but it's just your basic mental stuff. But like last summer, I went to a fantasy camp. If you've ever heard of fantasy camps, it's an American thing. Fantasy camp is like there'd be baseball fantasy camp, and you go to the major league spring training, and you get to put a baseball uniform on for a week and pretend like you're a major league player. That's fantasy
Well,
camp.
Okay. All right. Wow.
I went to a Beatles fantasy camp last year with all these people, these great musicians, and all these people who love the Beatles. And I was just on cloud nine. I mean, it really broke open. Like I wanted to work on some things, and that I think the plateauing part of creativity really is hard for me. Like I want to see, that's a
Mm.
three-ish thing. I want to see progress. And so that stimulation. So I came back. We would have these jam sessions every night. And it was the greatest thing ever because everybody was like me and they love this music and they know all these songs. And I mean, I was just giddy. And I came back into town. I said, I'm going to do a jam night here in town. And I'm going to have people come and we're going to sing Beatles songs all night. And I've done a few and they're packed and I'm so happy. And, like that's something I was creative about. I made my own. I thought I want to have a jam session, but nobody's like me. They don't have them all memorized. So I've put the words up and I'll teach them the parts. And it's really fun. And I've had friends that are musicians go, this is one of the coolest music things I've ever been to. I go, yes, thank you. So
I like
it's,
how that event really brings people in, like they can really
oh yeah.
participate without feeling put off by it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sing, y'all sing We Can Work It Out, get the harmony on the middle part. Oh, it's beautiful. Nothing like it. So
So you've like known you're a self-pres 3 for a while. Like has that
the whole time.
yeah. So has that changed or shaped your understanding of your own creativeness in any way? I mean,
Yeah,
it's been a really long time. So like
in a long time. So I'll tell you a few things that were like the clues of the three thing. So I was a school teacher, and when I was 27, I'd been rehabbing an old house, and I thought I'm going to build my own house. I'm going to build a log house myself. I didn't know I was a three, but ridiculously large project, unrealistic, very three-ish. I found out a few years later as a three is like, oh, that's what that thing was about. This gigantic achievement that everyone can see.
mhm.
So there's that thing that I've known. I was telling my fiance this the other day. I said, I really wanted to be a Renaissance man. I want to do everything. I want to go to college and take intro to every single subject. I want to, anytime you put a music instrument in front of me, I want to try to figure out how it's played. And that belief or that desire, I've just had just so many things that I'll micro get into for a while. My dad was
Mhm.
very similar. I come to think of my dad as a three. He made jewelry when I was in junior high. He made silver jewelry, and he was he just he was always producing something. I'll just put it that
Mm.
way. So the productivity part of it, uh, the pragmatic part of it, I love that.
Mm. I love how the log cabin is simultaneously a big achievement that everyone can see and very humble because it's a log cabin. There's nothing flashy about that. You know, we're not showing off there, people. It's just a log cabin.
It was a very big house. That was one of the first, like, so, as a seven sobriety, like, okay, you bit off more than you can chew, and just ridiculous. So I have a lot, the good thing about, being older is I'm able to go, oh, I can do that. I probably shouldn't do this, or, you know,
Mm.
but
I'm curious if the self-pres 3 like ego version of painting is copying something perfectly. What is like the out of self-pres? Like what is the essence version of painting and creating?
I think it has to be just, trying to remove the audience from it, the reception, or the critical part of it. I think that um, would be I don't think I'm trying to copy, I'm trying to copy a style, or I'm trying to
Hmm.
recreate something that I feel good about. Um,
Okay.
but I think there's the push me, pull you on the self-pres is, boy, I really want you to notice what I'm doing, but I really am never gonna want to have to tell you about it. That's the tension.
I understand this. I need you to recognize me, but don't say it. But say it, but don't say it. You know, like I want your praise and love,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
let's, you
Yeah.
know,
So I had done a lot of public speaking, public performing. I thought it was a social subtype until I went to see B and Aranio in class, and they're
mm,
just starting to drop some hints about my self-preservation nature. And it was like the scales fell from my eyes. And it was especially that recognition, tooting your own horn thing. Like I've heard self-pres fours go, man, I hate those whiny social fours. That's what they say. Whereas self-pres three is like, God, they're just a total braggart, but there's part of the self-pres three that still wants every bit of that recognition,
mm,
uh, desires it. And I think, putting yourself out there or not, that's just the constant uh,
right.
for me. Oh my gosh. I started my own business a year and a half ago. I need to promote myself or, I think I offer good things, but it's really, really hard
Yeah.
to just be out there. I have a friend who's a social three, and she has a food blog, and it's amazing. She's been on local TV cooking things, just like owns the stage, and just it's like, wow, you know, if you ask me to do it, I'll go do that. But I don't want to put myself out there. It's really hard for me to do that.
Mm. Yeah, it's
So,
it's difficult when part of our work is to take, well, for you to take the audience out of the equation and but then still promote yourself.
right. And what I usually tell people, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Have you ever heard that phrase? And I
I
think
have.
there's, you don't throw out the good stuff that you have, because I think when you first see your type, you just go, oh my gosh, I just need so much attention. Oh my gosh, I I'm totally dependent on that. I'm never going to do anything in front of people ever again. And that's not the answer.
No.
But I know one thing that I don't do anymore is fish for compliments. That was definitely, you know, I
Mhm.
found myself going, oh, so what did you think? Is that okay? And even though I knew I did a good job, it's like, oh,
Right.
you're fishing. So I'm really disciplined about things like that.
Mm,
Like, I'm getting in my ego.
yeah.
Stephen Colbert, who's a big late night talk show host, I think he's amazing, but he asks stars and guests often, he'll say, so when someone compliments you and they love your work, what do you say? And, oh, it's nothing, or gosh, shucks, you do that, or do you go, thank you very much? And he just believed that you should say, thank you very much. Thanks for recognizing that. Not get too much ego tied up with it, but at least also honor yourself.
Mm.
And the funny thing is, uh, I was in his hometown and was in a part of town and I saw him. And I was like, it's like meeting your hero. And I was ecstatic. I was just like, oh my gosh, the biggest, whoever you're the fan of.
Yeah.
And I just, I didn't know what to do. I saw him walking down the street with his family. My son was driving the car. He goes, okay, what are we going to do? I go, okay, drive around past him. I'm going to get out and just shake his hand. He goes, okay. So we drive around. I get outside. I think I scared him because I was so excited. And I just said, hi, I'm Jim from Kansas City, and I'm your biggest fan. And I was just like, oh, emotional. And he just shook my hand and he said, "Thank you very much." And I said, "Yep, he's doing exactly what he said." His older brother was there, and there's pictures of his older brother just laughing, like, "Oh my gosh, kid brother, here's some rando fanboying him." He's the baby of like 11 kids, and they're just
Oh,
going up.
really? I did not know that. Wow.
Fascinating. He's a fascinating individual. Love him. But that idea of honoring how you've been created, what you're made of, not
Mm,
diminishing that. Just, hey, I'm lucky, or this
mm.
is fun. I'm glad you had a good time.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
So my last question is, what creation are you most proud of?
it's a great question. I'll answer it in two ways. I've done in my life and work as a three, I've done a lot of operations jobs because I'm really good in operations, system structures, website. And there was an old Jack Nicholson movie called About Schmidt, and he was an insurance adjuster or something. And
Seen
he's
it? Yes.
he's trying to talk to this guy about, hey, can I help you with those tables? They're pretty hard. And the guy goes, no, I got it, the young guy. And he goes by the office a few days later, and his whole life work and these files is in the alleyway to be thrown in the dumpster. And that's what made me want to start to paint, because it's like, hey, son, you ought to see this budget I made in the year 2005. It was an incredible spreadsheet. And, it's just not going to have any legacy thing. So there's part of it that to me is I'm trying to create things or experiences that are that legacy piece. So
Mhm.
painting is part of that. But the second thing, and this is kind of a thing I realized, I have four boys and they're wonderful people. They're four different types and they're all doing what they should be doing. And we're close. Um, when they were growing up, I think I overly praised them for their achievements
Okay.
because I was an achiever. And I'm trying to correct that and let them know that they're loved just because of who they are and I care for them. And I have a granddaughter now, and oh my gosh, and a grandson. I just love that. Love it, love it, love it. So that feels much more lasting than something I create. I hope to have some paintings, or I hope to have some guitars that I pass down to my kids, instruments. They play music and
Mm,
they were around it because of me. That's great. But it's kind of that living legacy thing more than the tangible, I think is what's
mm.
meaningful.
Yeah, I really liked it. It really reminded me of when I sort of left one of my organizations really early on in my career. And I'd worked so hard to make all these things work. Just a few weeks later, realizing the hole just closes around you. It's like that gap was never there. The organization is an organism that just keeps going on. You had some sort of impact, but what is work then?
Yeah.
What
What is
what
my
do
legacy? Yeah.
So I love that that helped you see that legacy was important to you and to
Yeah.
shift and to bring creativity in
Yeah.
and
I
painting in.
actually think legacy for my kids is every interaction I have with them.
Oh,
They live
so is.
close and they need three things from me. They need me to be generous. They need to be encouraging. Um, they need me to believe in them, you know.
Mm,
That's what they really need.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And creating those relationships with our kids it is a creative act every day. It just can be
yeah,
hard to remember that amongst I live with young children, amongst the screaming, you know,
you
some
know,
days it's
that's where the
hard.
the grandchild thing is amazing because I have infinite patience. I raised four
Mm,
boys. I was a young man trying to make his way in the world. I wasn't patient. All the wounds that I've had to correct with my boys are about efficiency. Dad was trying to be too efficient. Total three thing,
right.
you know. So like now, like I'm not, when they're in their 20s and 30s, they're not going, hey, what's dad doing? What's dad thinking? They're not, they're making their way in the world, but I want to be generous, I want to be available, and I want to be encouraging.
Oh,
That to me is what they need.
thank you very much.
Absolutely.